Okay, let's go ahead and get started. How's my audio?
Let's have a look.
Are we good to go? Thumbs up, we are good to go. This next module talks about fault tolerance and recovery. So we're going to take a look at some recovery objectives. We're going to talk about fault tolerance and some redundant systems. We're going to talk about RAID. You're going to get a question on your exam about RAID. And we're going to talk about how to design your backup policies. So this first portion is going to talk about the recovery objectives. So let's take a look back over here at this whiteboard. Okay, let's take another look at the whiteboard then. There we go. It's messing with me this morning. Not even this morning. Okay. Time goes in this direction. Fine. Good, Eric. And right here we've had our incident. Whenever we have an incident, we have to think about the fact that in order for me to be able to recover from this incident, I'm going to have to go back in time to find my tape backup so that I can go ahead and move forward again so that we don't come down. Way out here on the far right-hand side, we have something called the mean tolerable downtime. Mean tolerable downtime says that after we've had our incident, whether this be a disruption to the company, could be the disaster, this is how long we can last with the money we have in the bank and the good name that we have, our reputation, our creditors are fronting us some money, but there will be a moment in time when all of that goes away. We're out of business, and that's what my mean tolerable downtime is. We want to be back up and running before that happens. Now, when I think about my starting spot, my starting spot is the recovery point objective. This is how far back I have to go in time to get my tape backup. It may have been a couple hours ago. It might have been yesterday. It might have been a week ago. It might have been a month ago. So let me give you an example of this. I love to hire from within. I hired a kid named Frank over at Silicon Valley College. Frank was one of my top students. He wanted to become my IT guy on my campus. And I said, sure, great, perfect. I've worked with you for about 8 months. I know everything about you. I thought I knew everything about him. So Frank says, I can't start on Monday after I graduate here on Friday. I'm going on my honeymoon. I'm getting remarried. So going on my honeymoon for 2 months or 2 weeks, and then I'll come back and I'll start right then. I said, that's fine. So Frank shows up after his honeymoon to go to work. I'm at a conference down at the main campus at Silicon Valley College. Frank, in his endeavors to be a better person, decided that not only would he be the IT person for my campus, he would be the IT person for all campuses. So he decided that anyone who had an admin account or an admin equivalent account was standing in his way. So he went through everyone on my campus, including myself, and deleted our accounts because we are admin equivalents. He went to the main campus in Fremont, California, over the wire, and deleted all of their administrator accounts. He went to San Jose and deleted all the administrative accounts. So while I'm sitting in the Fremont campus, there's a knock on the door where the network admin from Fremont comes into the office. I'm sitting there with Hector, who's the IT director from Fremont, and Steve, who's the IT director from San Jose. He says, gentlemen, can any of you log into your accounts? I couldn't get into my account. Hector couldn't get in. Steve couldn't get in. Steve calls his guy who can't get in. I call Frank, who can get in. And we can't figure this out. Why can Frank get into his account, but none of us can get in? We're stumped. Well, it turns out that Frank had gotten himself involved with a little cocaine or methamphetamine or something like that on his honeymoon. So he was pretty cranked out when he got into the office on that Monday morning. So he decided that I'm going to give myself a raise and I'm just going to take over I'm taking over the whole campus. Kind of reminds me of some other people in this world. Putin comes to mind with this one. So I'm going to take over, the Ukraine and all these other places. So you start thinking about this, and Frank kind of set himself up on this, and not only did he take over all the networks, he also had the locks changed on my server room door. My keys no longer work. So I get back to my campus, and I'm trying to get in there. I can hear Frank inside, but he won't let me in, and my key won't work. So I call campus security, and I go, hey, guys, you know what? We need you here. So we sat at the table outside of the door to my server room all night long. About 9 o'clock the next morning, Frank comes out. He said, I quit, and he dropped the keys on the table, walked out the door, boom, was gone. Here's the important part of this whole thing. Really do a good background check on people that you hire. But I had done my backup, so we're looking at the time frame. Actually, I want to go a different color on this. We're looking for the time frame here, going backwards. How long is this time frame? So from here back for me, this is now Tuesday. I had done my backup on Sunday night. That was my recovery point objective. Hector hadn't done his for 2 weeks. Steve hadn't done his for 6 weeks. You see why this recovery objective becomes important to you? How long ago was the tape done? Do you have a copy of the tape? Do you know where to go to get the tape? Because that becomes real important. The other thing that we're going to take a look at over here is the recovery time objective. If this is a normal day for me in a normal week, my tape backups are done every Sunday night of all my systems, because I had 14 servers and routers and switches and firewalls. So I wanted to make sure I had backups of all this stuff. That backup, when it's done on Sunday, I go down to the office, I pick up that backup. It goes in the safe that's in my office. Frank didn't know that was there, so he didn't know we would recover. The problem is that you've got myself as an IT director. I have all my class evals. I've got all my instructor evals, all of my information about all the new classes coming up. All of that got wiped out the moment that he wiped out my access into my account. Same thing with Hector, same thing with Steve. On our campuses, all that information. Hector had been on the campus for 6 years doing that. Steve had been there for 4 years. So they've got a lot more information writing on all of this in the way of evals for employees. So you're always looking at how often should I be doing this and where should it be stored and who should have access to this. So now we're looking at how long is it going to take me to go from this spot right here all the way out. I want to make sure I get it done before the recovery time objective. So I've got that much time to really get this done. That recovery time objective is what we've told upper management is how long it takes us to get back up on our feet and everything is running. So we're always taking a look at this and asking ourselves, did I do this right? Did I back up this properly? Am I doing it often enough that I don't have to worry about this? Now, the way to remember this, the way I remember this, you can do it any way you want. Recovery point objective, the P in point is to the left of T in time in the alphabet, so that's how I remember recovery point is to the left and recovery time is to the right. So these are the things that we look at whenever we come in and we start thinking about how quickly can we get back up and running. So that recovery time objective, the maximum expected amount of downtime in case of a failure. This includes the troubleshooting, recovery itself, and testing. Recovery point objective is the maximum expected period of time for which data will be lost in the case of a disaster, defined primarily by the data backup frequency. So how often are we doing those data backups and how quickly can we get to that? As we start thinking about fault, wait, that didn't, what? Keeps doing this on me. There it goes. When we think about fault tolerance, what we're thinking about with fault tolerance is reducing that single point of failure. On the backside of our Cisco switches, we have a little 8-pin plug-in which is now allowing me to add another power supply into my switch. It already has one built in. If that one were to die, at least I have secondary power coming in. I'm reducing the single points of failure. And that's really what I want to be able to do anytime I start looking at my equipment and the different devices that I have. So how can I reduce my single points of failure? So is it possible for me to have error correcting software or hardware, or can I operate at a reduced capacity? I want to make sure that if something goes down that I can be back up and running. So some of the backup components that we can have could be my backup power. It could be that I'm running either a UPS, uninterruptible power supply, which is only good for a certain amount of time because there's a battery inside and we're limited by the load on that battery. Could be RAID storage. So I'm doing a RAID 5 or RAID 6, so if one drive or two drives go out, I can replace those. Could be that I'm doing load balancing. So I've got information coming in. Let's take a quick look at load balancing for something like a router or a firewall. So if I were to set up my firewalls this way, so this guy will be my primary, this guy will be my secondary, I have a heartbeat going on between the two of these. So the secondary keeps sending out these heartbeats over the primary. Are you there? Are you there? Are you there? Hey, that would be a great commercial, wouldn't it? Shoot me before you let me do that. So it keeps sending this back and forth. Now we have to think that we might want to take this and split this out. I might say, look, I have a certain amount of traffic I want to load balance that I've got between my systems. So I could split this out right here and say, over here I got group 1, over here I got group 2. Split this guy out, over here I got group 1. Over here I got group 2. So right now half my traffic's going through group 1 on its way out. The other one says I got group 2 going out. This works. So I'm taking my information and I'm load balancing it between the two. What sort of percentage would you want to max out on for either one of these? Why less than 50? In case one goes down, the other one wants to take over. So we might be running this guy at 45% utilization, and we're going to run this guy at 40%. So the idea would be if group 1 goes down here, or if the firewall goes down, group 1 can come over here, and we've got 45 plus 40 is 85% utilization. We aren't bringing down the system. There's a problem with this, and that problem is my chief operations officer. Why is that individual a problem? Parsimonious. He's parsimonious. We have to get the right word out. Yeah, he's cheap. Okay, but he's also an ignoramus because he can't think this whole thing through. He's going to come in here and he's going to look over there and go, wait a minute, you're running this thing at 45% utilization. No, 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 no. We want this up to at least 75 to 80% utilization. We're going to go ahead and take this side all the way up to 85 to 90% utilization. What's going to happen when that side dies? Everything's going to crash over here. Anybody here a Star Trek fan? The original? Did you watch the original? Captain Kirk? So Captain Kirk on the Enterprise and Scotty are sitting there and they're going by a wormhole. So as they go by the wormhole, they're like, oh, look out the window, it's a wormhole. As they go by it, all of a sudden, the Enterprise gets stopped and they're starting to get pulled in the backwards direction. So you're the captain on board. What are you going to tell Scotty to do when you're getting pulled into the wormhole?
Full speed ahead.
Scotty, full speed ahead. Give him more. Give him more. So Scotty's down there and he's in the engine room and he's got his throttle as far forward and you can see the dilithium crystals just glowing orange. They're about as orange as Ty's shirt there, you know, and his face is glowing as well. And Captain Kirk's going, Scotty, I need more, I need more. And what is Scotty saying? Captain, I've given her all she's got. We're up to 110%. And what does Captain Kirk say?
Hand overboard.
It's a Navy thing. We don't worry about that. So Captain Kirk's going, Scotty, you've got to give it everything we got, because if you don't, we're going to die. What's Scotty say? Hey, if we're going to die, I might as well just give it all we got. So he takes the throttle and he throws it forward, and you see this huge orange glow come out, and they show you the Enterprise stopping, and all of a sudden, pew, takes off. So after this, they're playing the music as Scotty comes upstairs, and Scotty's standing there looking at him, and he's got this bright orange glow across his whole face. His arms are orange. It's got to be that suntan lotion that Trump uses. That leaves them orange. I'm looking at this going, that's such a great shot right there. And that's what would happen here, is that if you overwhelm the system and you go beyond 90%, why 90%? When you think about these things, we only want to go to 90% on load balancing because we want to have that little extra in there, because you are going to get some bigger packets that come through. You have these burst packets that come through that will go to 100, 110, 115%, but it's only a short burst and then it comes back down, a short burst and it comes back down. We can handle that. But if we did this and one side went down, no way we could handle that. So load balancing becomes real important to us. Now on the clustering side, we start thinking about clustering. This is where you've got multiple Microsoft servers that are working together. So we start thinking about the clustering side of things, and we say, I've got 6 clustered servers here. The idea that Microsoft came out with, I thought, was just brilliant. We can utilize all your memory and all your processing power between all these systems. Should one of these systems go down, the other ones can take over. So as I've clustered my systems together, I have the power of combining all their CPUs, all their RAM, and have this ability to be able to utilize all their resources. If one or two goes down, we're still good. We're still up and running. We've talked about virtualization, and in fact, with virtualization, I can also do kind of load balancing with the virtualization, where I'm going to be setting it up for 10 virtual machines on each system, but only use 5 over here and 5 over here, so that if these 5 go down, we can just bump them over here because we can handle 10 virtual systems over here. We also have those alternate sites. We've got the cold site with the floors, walls, ceiling, air conditioning, and power. We're going to add in, as we move into the Warm site, we're going to add the tables, the chairs, the workstations, a couple servers, and maybe internet connectivity. We get into the hot site. Hot site's got all the tables, chairs, workstations, servers, and can be up and running within 2 hours. Or we might have an alternate site, which is a co-location. So we start thinking about the ways that we can do this. So here are their definitions of some of the sites there. The cold site, space and utilities, but no hardware. A warm site, some hardware, but not ready to go. Your hot site is fully equipped backup location, can be ready in hours. We think about some of the replacement parts that we have. A hot spare is ready to go. A cold spare is ready to install. When you think about a hot spare, it says I can pop this out while it's still being run and I can replace it. A cold spare says I have to shut down the system before I pull that out and replace it. Otherwise, I will end up blowing something up. I know this because I did this with a router. Routers have modules that go inside of them, and I put a module in while the system was turned on. I was not paying attention. I wanted the machine below it, which was completely shut down and unplugged. So I plugged my card into a machine that was up and running. The light does turn on, green. The card makes a funny sound, the same sound my cereal made this morning when I poured milk on it, which is crackle. Snap, crackle, and a huge pop. And then this kind of bluish smoke comes out.
That's normal.
Is it?
That's the break-in process.
So I inhaled this. My student looked at me and goes, "You do realize that's poisonous?" And I went, "I'm not going to really hurt anything. You already know my personality. It's not going to affect." Maybe that's what did affect my personality. I don't know. You take a look at something like that and you say, that cost me $85. But the thing to remember is if you are in doubt as to whether or not this is a hot swappable piece of equipment, shut the unit down anyway and then swap the equipment and bring it up. Okay? You are going to need to know a little of this information for your test. This will be one of your hands-on. So when we take a look at the hands-on, I'll show you guys the hands-on a little bit later on. So when we start thinking about RAID, I apologize, this is misspelled. RAID is actually spelled R-A-I-I-D. And the reason I bring that up is because depending on the book that you read, the I in one book is going to stand for independent, and an I in another book is going to stand for inexpensive. So I try to spell it with two I's, the redundant array of independent and inexpensive disks. That way I cover all my assets at the same time because, covering one's assets is always important. RAID 0. RAID 0 says I've got one machine talking to two drives. I'm going to talk with my first file to drive A. Then I'm going to go to drive B. Then I'm going back to with the third file to drive A. Fourth file to drive B. Fifth file to drive A. I just keep pushing the files to different drives. With RAID 0, if I lose a drive, I lose half my data. So that is the problem that we have with RAID 0. It really is not providing redundancy. There's no security benefit. There's only disk striping, which means I'm writing to multiple drives. RAID 1 is disk mirroring. RAID 1 says what I'm going to do is I'm going to write to two drives simultaneously. So every file goes to both drive 1 and drive 2 at the same time. So I keep writing to both drives. One drive goes down, not a problem. The other drive is still up and running. The problem we run into is I have one controller. I can put in a second controller. That means each controller writes to its own drive, which then gets me set up for RAID 10, which is combining RAID 0 and 1. Now I'm writing to these two drives, then to these two drives, then to these two, then to these two. So I'm doing RAID 1 plus 0, which is my nested striping and mirroring. So that's combining the two of those. The most important RAIDs are RAID 5 and RAID 6. With RAID 5, I've got 3 drives. With RAID 5, I'm doing striping with parity. This says that I am going to be writing the information to all 3 drives simultaneously. If one drive goes down, the first 2 drives can rebuild the third drive. So we're always taking a look at rebuilding that third drive. Can we do this? RAID 6 steps it up one more step up from that. RAID 6 says I can have 4 drives. With 4 drives, what can I do? With 4 drives, I can go ahead and write to all 4 drives simultaneously. If 2 drives go down, I can replace those 2 drives and rebuild those 2 drives. Okay? We are looking at the inevitability of a drive dying with either RAID 5 or RAID 6. So in RAID 5, we can have 1 drive go down. In RAID 6, I can have 2 drives go down. Anthony, you have that funny looking smirk on your face like something's not right. No, you're good? Okay. I thought maybe for a second there you're looking at that going, nah, this is wrong, man. This is all wrong. Nope, you were wrong earlier. Spock would never do it. No, Spock would never have let Scotty do that. Spock would have gone down himself and be glowing. His big, pointy, glowing ears, yes. That's such a great show. I love the fact that they brought a lot of those guys back into the Big Bang Theory. They actually had them playing poker the other night, so William Shatner was on there. It's like, right, it's good to see the guy again, you know? So any questions on RAID? Okay. It's not the one I wanted. Put it up on your systems. I didn't put it up on this system. Okay. This is a question that a lot of my students got. This is on the so on the 501 hands-on questions. So this is on the Word file that's there. So what they're asking you to do is what you've got here is we were just looking at RAID. So we've got RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 6. We've got 4 servers up here, an authentication server, an email archive, identity management, and media streaming. What they're going to ask you to do is take each one of those and put it in these 4 boxes right here, and then tell it how many drives we need for each one of these, and are we using parity or are we using distriping or mirroring for these. So when we take a look at these 4 different entities, the authentication server, the email archive, the identity management software, and the media streaming, we have to determine which one of these is the most secure and which one do you want to put into RAID 6. So I always start with the most secure. So which one of those do you think out of those 4 things was most secure? They're at the very bottom there. Media streaming server, identity management, email, or authentication server. So you're going to put the identity management here. This is a RAID 5 or RAID 6. How many drives do we have in RAID 6? We have 4. Are they doing distriping or dismirroring? Striping. So I would come down and say striping, 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 striping. Are they doing 2 sets of parity? Yes, which means 2 drives can go down and I can replace them. So I'm going to go ahead and put a check mark here and a check mark here. So that's basically what you're going to do with this drag and drop. So these are just examples of what you would see in the drag and drop. There's no way to do any of the drag and drops. We can't do that. These are just pictures of what you can see. We don't have the ability to write the software to actually put all this in there. So let's take a look. At the very bottom of this, it's going to show you what the answer is. So this is halfway down. So let's go in and take a look at the full answer here. So again, in the upper left, what we have is RAID 0. So in RAID 0, this is a media streaming server. So that's the least of our most important servers. They're doing disk striping or data striping. So we're sending it to 2 drives simultaneously. There's no parity in that one. As we take a look over here is RAID 1. We talked about the fact that we are doing a mirroring with this. So what we're doing is we're sending the data to both systems simultaneously. So you've got the mirroring up here for just 2 drives, and that's your authentication server. As we get down to RAID 5 is going to be my email archive. Now this is what you ought to remember for this on the test, is that the example I gave you up in Sacramento of the kid coming to me telling me that his email server was dying and they wouldn't let him do a tape backup because he was running RAID 5. So in RAID 5 it requires 3 drives. So he had his 3 drives in there all doing striping. His 3rd drive went down. When he went to replace that 3rd drive, the 2nd drive died. Why? Because they were so old, they were trying to rebuild this, and he lost his email server. So that to me is how I remember where that one goes. And again, back over here in RAID 6, this is my identity management server. I've got 4 drives that are doing striping plus 2 parities. Over here we only have the single parity because I can only lose 1 drive at a time. Here I can lose 2 drives and rebuild that. Okay? So this is the type of hands-on that you might get. It's a good probability that you'll probably get this one on there. Okay? So if you were to go through some of the hands-on questions, this is kind of what you would want to do as you go through these, is take a look at it, and that's what we're looking for on this. So with RAID failures, we have the drive failure. So again, we can have drive failures in RAID 1, not a problem. RAID 4, not a problem. Or I'm sorry, RAID 5, not a problem. RAID 6, not a problem. We can rebuild those should something happen. We can have a controller failure. Most RAID units will use a single controller, which means it's a single point of failure, so you want to be very cautious of that. Like anything else, you can have power issues. You could have your primary unit go down. You could have the RAID unit go down because a lot of them are a built-in unit that has the 3 drives in there or 4 drives in there. So that could be a problem. You can run into software issues. I've seen software issues where we went to put in a brand new RAID 5 system with NetWare, and they didn't put in the right drivers between the NetWare version we were using and this new RAID server. This was when RAID 5 first came out. Our bank paid $250,000 for each of the 2 boxes, and within 2 hours I blew up both boxes. They looked at me and they went, "What's going on? Why you just spent $500,000 on this and you just blew them both up?" And I said, "They told me it works. I've got everything I put in the order they told me to do it." So I called them up and they sent out another set of drives, and I said, I think you need to send out a technician. So the technician that put the whole thing together comes out with 2 new boxes. He sets up the first box and he says, "Well, let me show you how to do this." So he installs the software, he puts in the DOS, he puts in the NetWare, he puts in the applications that we're running, and he brings it up to the next version, and all of a sudden he burns out that box. And he looks at me and he goes, "This isn't your fault, this is our fault." I'm sorry, can I get that on tape, please? Would you mind saying that again for the recorder? And he goes, "I think I know what the problem is." And it turns out that the driver that they wrote to interface between the 2 was written wrong. So he came back about 4 hours later and he said, "I rewrote it and I think it works." So we tried the last box he had, that one worked. So he went over and he went back home and then shipped us out another box, so we were good to go. So there are times when you have software issues in RAID, so you always gonna want to make sure that you go back in and test those. Remember on the RAID rebuild stress that in RAID 5 or RAID 6, if I've got 1 drive or 2 drives out, the other drives are going to work very hard to rebuild, and that might be stress enough to actually bring those drives down. So that becomes a concern to us. Let's talk about tape backups. Matt, what was the number of whiteboards I had to put up to set a new record? Are we there yet at 31?
Not even close.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, the other guy had like 60.
Oh. I'm just going to put 1 word up on each page then. I'm not worried about it. Okay, so let's take a look at backups. So if I've got the weekend, I've got Saturday, I've got Sunday, let's put Friday in there too. And so then I got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we're back to our Friday, Saturday, Sunday again. In most instances, when we start thinking about the tape backups that we do, over on the weekend we do a full backup. We do this on the weekend because a full backup says we want to back up all the data that we have on our network. It usually takes quite a few hours to do this. I've seen it take as many as 14 hours or 16 hours. So we start this on Friday right after work is over. The banks I did it for, we start at about 6 p.m. It would usually go until at least 10 a.m. the next morning, sometimes even later. So as we start thinking about that full backup, depending on if you're using a tape system or a drive system, depends on how you have it set up. You might have multiple tapes, and so you might have a tape machine that actually starts pulling down additional tapes to make sure that we get this full backup. Now I have a couple choices on how I do this. When we do a full backup, we reset the archive bit on this. So on Monday, I could do an incremental. This is all the changes that occurred on Monday. So incremental on Monday is a pretty small file. On Tuesday, I can come in and do an incremental. And that would be all the changes that occurred on Tuesday. If I come in and do an incremental here on Wednesday, then that's all the changes that occurred since Tuesday. Let's say at 2 a.m. on Thursday morning, 0200, or if you're in my world, 2 a.m., we have a crash. What do I need on Thursday to get things back up and running? Full plus Which incremental? I'm going to need the incremental for everything that changed on Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday. So I need all three of those. Because remember, this was everything that changed during Monday. This was everything that changed during Tuesday. This is everything that changed during Wednesday. I need all of that in my computer system, so that's how I would build this. Okay. Now, the other way to do this would be to start with a full backup here on the weekend. Again, we're resetting the archive bit on this. With the incrementals, we don't reset the archive bit. On the Monday, I'm going to do what's called a differential. Differential says, give me everything that changed since the last full backup. So if this is my differential for Monday, it is equivalent to what I did with my incremental. The only difference is that I flipped the bit here because it's everything that got backed up since here. If I do a differential here on Tuesday, everything that changed since the last full backup. Now, my backup's now getting bigger and bigger. My differential on Tuesday would include everything that changed on Tuesday and everything that changed on Monday. If I do a differential here on Wednesday, everything that changed on Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday. The file keeps getting bigger and bigger. Does that make sense to everybody? Sometimes when we get out to Thursday's differential, sometimes this thing's so big it's going to take multiple disks or multiple tape drives to do this. Now, we've had our crash again at 2 a.m. on Thursday morning. What do I need to rebuild this? So I need the full plus the differential from Wednesday. So it takes me less time to rebuild, but it takes me more time to back up. Does that make sense? Use some more space on it, yep. So this is what we're looking at when we start looking at the different solutions that we've got for a tape backup. So the archive bit that we have is marking the need for a backup. So the full backup is all the data that's on the volume. My incremental backs up only the files with a set archive bit, then clears the bit. So it's quick to make, it's slow to restore. My differential backs up only the files with the set archive bit, but does not clear the bit afterwards. So it's slow to make it's slower to make, but quicker to restore. So the differential to me is the better of the choice because I've got all this information on one tape. It's real easy for me to restore this. We talked about snapshots. Snapshots are only used for my virtual machines, so I can quickly capture the state of the machine by simply doing a snapshot. Boom, we are ready to go. So if I'm using a Linux system, if I'm using a virtual machine, I can say, let's take a snapshot of this. I can always revert to that snapshot just that quick, but it's only specifically for that machine. So we start thinking about the frequency options that we have. I can do a full backup every night. If it's taken me 16 hours to do a backup, that's not leaving us much time to do our work during the day. So you can do a full backup every Friday night with incrementals, an incremental backup the 4 days of the week, or I could come in and do a full backup on Friday and a differential for the other 4 days, which is the upper and lower of those two examples I put up on that board for you. We think about backup security. Make sure that you label your media. Let me say that again so you get this correct. Make sure that you label your media. Does anybody in here know much about accounting? Does anybody know what a bank reconciliation is? Bank reconciliation, at the end of the month, the bankers send in an independent third party to do a bank reconciliation. What they're going to do is take your closing statement for the month and make sure that you have the right balance, that somebody's not stealing money. That's funny. There are a lot of banks in the last 20 years that have gone out of business because people stole money. I wonder why that happens in some banks and not others. Anyway, when I was at Allied Bank, I was doing the tape backups. I was doing the I was doing all these backups at each location. Normally, I would do the full backups. On the weekends, I would do incrementals across the wire just so I would have backups should something happen. I'm having to do a full backup in the middle of the week. Well, actually, I guess it was more like a Thursday because it's end of month. This is where the auditors come in and want to do a bank reconciliation for end of month. It's a specialized backup that we're doing. I'm getting ready to leave on my vacation that same day. I want to make sure the tape is done. I'm going to hand it off to my boss, and I'm going to go jump on a plane and get out of Dodge. So I hand the tape to my boss, and I said, Linda, here's the tape. Would you please label it and take it to the other facility? She said, she's my boss, so she said, sure. Have a great vacation. So I go off on my vacation. I come back. There's somebody standing at my cubicle about 8:15 on Monday morning. It's like, hi, Eric. I'm like, hi, Denise. What's going on? She says, you know, it's that end-of-month reconciliation. I need to get my hands on last month's end-of-month tape. I said, we did it. I gave it to Linda. She put it in the... She goes, I can't find it. So I go in and look for it. I can't find it. So I go ask Linda what happened to the tape. She's like, you know, you handed me the tape. I'm driving to the other location. My phone rings. My son's been in a bicycle accident. If your kid's in an accident, what's most pressing in your mind right now? Your kid, are they safe? So what does Linda do? She races to the ER. She gets to the ER, and they're like, I'm sorry, ma'am, but he's in surgery right now. You'll just have to wait. So her form of coping and waiting is to walk across the street to the liquor store and get a bottle of wine. So she comes back. She puts it into a Coke bottle so she can drink it while she's in there. So she's in there getting slammed. Mark comes out. He's got a couple broken ribs and a broken leg and a fractured femur or something. I don't know. Anyway, she takes Mark home. Mike is pretty wasted. Puts him to bed because he's on some pain medication, and she takes her bottle of wine and she sits down at her computer. She goes, it's time to get online and see what's going on. She's pretty drunk, apparently. She fires up her computer, and the first thing it says is, it is time for you to do a tape backup. And she goes, oh, I saw a tape in my purse. She takes my end-of-month tape and she drops it in, and it says, this has data on it. Would you like to format it? And she said, yes. So it overwrote the entire end-of-month tape. So when I went into her office and I asked about where the tape is, this was the story she gave me, and she was sticking to it. So it kind of pissed me off a little bit. I said, I got Denise out here asking for reconciliation. She's like, oh, man. I said, you got a tape in your drawer? She goes, yep. I said, take it out. She goes, it's brand new. I said, take it out. Write on it. Now give it to me. She's like, what? I said, just write end of month on there. I took the tape and I did that right behind her monitor. What did I just do? Just degoused it. So I walked back in. I said, Denise, I'm really sorry, but we just found the tape and there's nothing on it. Apparently it got degoused. Apparently I mistakenly got it too close to the back end of a monitor before I handed it to Linda. I'm going to have to rebuild this from you from the other tapes. She goes, not a problem. As long as I have it by the end of the week, you got 2 days to do this. I'm like, okay then. So I rebuilt the tape. Again, it took me a few extra hours to do this. So Linda, to say thank you to me, Linda comes up to me and she says, you know, I was talking to Spike, who's our CFO. He wants to extend your hours for another 600 hours. And he said, is it worth giving Eric an extra $15 an hour to get him to stay with us? Linda goes, I think he's earned it. So I got a really nice little pick-me-up there for a couple extra dollars for helping her out and not blaming her for this whole thing. Degousing of tapes happens. So you're always looking at making sure that got labeled. This was my fault. I should, one, have labeled the tape What else can you do on a tape to make sure it never gets overwritten? What's that? Nope. There's a little what? There's a little switch or a little thing that you pop out, so even though you put it into a tape drive, it goes, I can't write to this tape. This is read-only. That was my fault. Those are the things I should have done. Physically secure that, put a label on it. Those two things were really my fault. So I look back on that, and I said, you know, it's really nice to get the raise and all of that, but the whole problem really stemmed from me not taking the time to put a label on it. So while the tape was being made, I should have been labeling this up. I should have been ready to pop that out. So that was really my fault. When we think about backup security, we think about the secure network transmission. So if by chance I'm backing this up over the wire to some other location, make sure that's encrypted. Physically secure the media transport. So if I'm going to be taking the media from one location to another, make sure it's in a secured box that's locked. If it's going to an offsite location, what are some of the concerns that I have? Temperature and humidity become some of the concerns that I have. I also have to think, because this is magnetic media, that if I need to secure that disposal, I can degauss this tape. I can also shred the tape as well. So there's a couple things we can do with that. When we think about our backup policy, we think about what's important to back up. Do I need to back up applications? Not really. Data is the real thing I need to back up. How long should we hold on to this data? How long should I hold on to the tape? I want to make sure that I choose the proper backup strategy and scheduling. I want to plan for data security. I want to make sure that I am securing this even though it's on tape or some other form of a backup. I want to make sure that I assign personnel responsibilities. It's your job to make sure it gets backed up. It's somebody else's job to make sure the transport is okay. Create and apply a backup testing schedule. The most important thing to do is go in there and take a look at that tape backup. Does it have everything on it? Can I restore from this tape backup? Once a week, I enjoyed just creating a directory called ELF 12345, whatever week it was, and I would put 3 files in there. I would put it in, I'd get it backed up, I would destroy that, I'd delete it, I'd try to restore it 3 days later from an old tape backup. If it worked, I know that I'm backing up my data. So you always got to take a look at that. So when we think about fault tolerance and recovery, which of the following RAID levels incorporates disk striping? Choose all that apply. 0, 5, and 10, yes. RAID 1 does not include disk striping. It does disk mirroring. The process of rebuilding a RAID drive from parity data can cause RAID drives to fail. Yes. Why? They're old. Why do you look at me when you say that? Ooh. Are you testing? You're not testing tomorrow, are you? You know, I have those new files that have all the new questions on it. Too bad you're not getting a copy. No, I'm just... That was good. That was really good. I liked that. So again, that is true. The rebuild process is very intensive for the I/O, so the input-output, so it does place additional wear and tear on the drive, so it can fail. Next question, if you have a RAID implementation with data parity, you do not need data backups. That is false. RAID protects against drive failures, not threats to the data. You have a critical database server that constantly backs up its files up to the cloud, but its software environment is so finicky that if it encountered a critical failure, it would take a long time to get it working again. How would you describe your recovery plan for that service? You want since it won't lose any data in the failure, the recovery point is low. So since it'll take a long time to get back online, the recovery time objective is high. So it's a low RPO and a high RTO. Clustering is similar to load balancing, but tends to use tighter integration between redundant systems. That is true. Multiple servers in the cluster are aware of each other and will operate toward a common goal. Your company rents a spare server room in a secondary location. It has all the necessary hardware, software, and network services, and you just need to load the latest backups to get it into operation. What is it? It is my hot site. In terms of time, how does a differential backup plan generally differ from an incremental backup plan? Slower to create, but quicker to restore. So answer C is the correct answer. Yeah. What backup type might require specific operating system support? Snapshot, because we're using a virtual machine for that. Buster, are we getting close to the end of the book? I have 5 to 10 pages. I've got 9 pages. 10 pages.
10 pages.
Well, since I have to keep you here till 3:30, I'm just not going to say anything for 20 minutes. No, I'm kidding. I want to finish out this book, and then I want to start going through some of the hands-on questions with you so you're aware of what they might ask. Incident response. When you think about incident response, the first thing you have to think about is my forensic team. Where did they get trained? Are they ready? Have they seen some of this stuff before? Why do you have that smile on your face, Richard? Like, I want to be a forensic analyst. I want to just, I want to go in there and mess with you. You're looking at me because you want to mess with my system, right? You think about that education the person has. So we're going to take a look at how to collect that forensic evidence. We're going to talk about incidents and then how to respond to an incident. We always think about forensics. If we are collecting the forensic evidence at a incident that we have at our office, we always have to think about the fact that we may or may not be collecting this as evidence that will be admissible in court. You've probably seen plenty of TV shows where they go through and they're capturing all this information and gathering the data. They're storing it, they're bagging it, they're tagging it, they're writing it, they're carrying it, they're transporting it from one location to another. And when they finally get into court, the judge is going to go, I'm sorry, this is inadmissible. The judge has the final say as to whether or not the evidence is relevant to the case, that it was collected properly, that it was stored properly, that that chain of custody was correct, and that we can go ahead and bring this into court. If they want to bring you in for testimony, it could be a sworn statement, it could be an oral statement, you're going to come in and testify, it could be a written statement, you're going to go ahead and submit something to the courts. It could be that you don't want to come in front of the courts, that you would like to do something called a deposition, so you can actually go into a law firm and be deposed, which means that you're going to do your testimony right there. They're going to videotape it, and they're going to show this back to the jury. So when we think about the real evidence, we think about, in most cases, if this is someone who's been murdered, do you have the gun? Do you have the knife? Do you have the baseball bat? Whatever was used to kill this individual, that would be the real evidence, the physical evidence. The problem is when I walk into court and we start talking about bits and bytes and you got to talk to the jury, and you got my mom on the jury who at the time would have been 85 years old, she'd look up and go, what the heck's a bit? What's a byte? And what do you mean this is all virtual? Reality is you and me talking right here. What's virtual? She didn't know any of this stuff. So when you think about having to explain this to a jury, this is why most companies choose not to do this, because they know the jury's not going to understand it. But here's the other problem of this. You get somebody who has actually perpetrated this fraud or this sort of attack against your office. What sort of punishment are they going to get? Bill, where do they go? They go to Danbury, Connecticut. What do they have up there in Danbury, Connecticut that you can get from the guards if you have enough money for a 6 o'clock tee-off time? Yes, indeed. You can get to the front of the row if you've got enough money. That's where Bernie Madoff stayed for a while. So he's out there with his 6 o'clock in the morning tee-off time. They also have tennis courts. You want to become a tennis pro, this is the place you want to go. You want to say, hey, Judge, Your Honor, would you please send me up to Danbury? I got to work on my slice. What? Yeah, this works. So you start thinking about what's the punishment going to be. Where are they sending, what's his name, Trump's old attorney? Michael Cohen. Where are they sending him? The place they're sending him doesn't have a tennis court or a golf, whatever you call it, golfing range. They're sending him to a place that has bocce ball. So this is where you play, it's a little Italian game where you're throwing little balls out there. So you can get on for 3 to 4 hours of bocce ball a day. He's going to be in a place where he can bring in Martha Stewart to revamp his cell. Martha did this over at Danbury. She was in the women's prison just 3 blocks down. She would come over to the men's prison and actually do this to their prisons. I'm sorry, we need to put some new drapes. These old drapes don't match the rest of your bliss. I'm just looking at this going, you got to be kidding me. So does the punishment fit the crime? What have they done? Have they stolen your money? Have they brought down your business? Did they steal something from you? You always have to take a look at what is the evidence pointing to and what have they done. So when we start thinking about going in front of the court, we have to present the evidence. It could be demonstrative evidence. This is representative of an object or an event. We may end up making a whole video or a computer-based video that shows how the crime was actually perpetrated. And I think in the old TV show called Matlock, this is what the opposing counsel used to call the dog and pony show. So you get up and you show this is how this could have been perpetrated. It helps the jury understand and look at the facts of what are there. We think about the digital evidence. This is the hardest part to get someone to understand. We're storing ones and zeros on the computer. No, that's not what we're doing. There's little magnetic chips inside of the hard drive that are turned this way or this way, a 1 or a 0. What? Trying to get someone to understand that in the courtroom is always tough. And I mean, if you are defending someone, you can completely confuse the jury and they're going to go, you know what, he's not guilty. No one could be guilty of this because who understands any of this stuff? So it's very difficult when you go into court to actually get someone convicted because of the laws and because of the way that this stuff's being presented. In collecting evidence, the first thing that you want to do, you're sitting at your desk, you are the forensic analyst. Your phone rings. We've had an incident. You're going to grab your bags and a few other things. Most importantly, first thing that you have is your camera. As you come into the scene, you're going to take pictures of what's going on. I'm going to take pictures of the screens that I have. I want to see what sort of data is up on your screen. I'm going to do an Alt-Tab and move through all the screens that you have up there. I've got software I'm going to put on your system. I'm going to capture all the volatile memories. Which memory on my computer is the most volatile? Is there something more volatile than RAM? Called cache because it runs much faster. Is there anything more volatile than cache? It's my buffers that are up on my CPU. So yeah, it goes buffers, cache, RAM, and then it comes down to my hard drive. I've got swap space on my hard drive, and then my hard drive is the least volatile. So we need to know what are the different memories that I have and the order of volatility. So I need to classify that evidence by order of volatility. I need to capture that because the stuff that is most volatile, the moment I shut down my system, guess what? I'm never going to see that again. Once I shut down that system, I'm never allowed to turn it on again. So these are some of the concerns that we have. I need to capture the evidence. I need to take logs, screenshots, forensic backup tools to get all that volatile memory and capture all of that. The time offsets. If there's a time offset between network time protocol and my machine, I need to know, is my machine 2 hours ahead or 2 hours behind? Because with my log files, this is going to give me some evidence to go look back at. When we think about the witnesses, the first thing I tell you to grab is your camera is because when you come into the scene, you're taking pictures. Who's there at the time that this occurred? Who are the other people who are witnesses to this? That becomes real important to us. Now that I have picked up all of my memory, I've taken my pictures, I'm now going to shut down the system and I'm going to bag it and tag it. When I bag it and tag it, I write on it when I collected it, who collected it, when they collected it, where they collected it. We now take it back to my forensic lab. When I get back to the forensic lab, I've got a tool that I use. I'm going to take my hard drive out of the system and I'm going to put it into my tool. The tool is going to automatically lock it so we can never write to this hard drive again. It's then going to take a hash of the hard drive. It's then going to replicate this hard drive over here. I might make 1, 2, or 3 replicas depending on what the courts require. It may be that I only need 1 for the courts to use. I might need 1 for the prosecuting and 1 for the defense attorney. It just depends on what the courts are asking for. So I then go in to the replicated drive. I never look back. I never turn on the original again. I'll take the replica of this, run the hashes on all the replicas to make sure they match. Once that matches, I'm going to go analyze the data. Was this really an attack? Or was this person just, a little exuberant on getting us out here to look at this? I'm going to assemble my findings, and I'm going to take it to upper management. So we're going to sit down with upper management and find out what do we want to do to respond. I go to leadership. I say, you've got to have for your team the leadership. So I've got to have both the skill and the authority in the organization to do this. We've got to have good technical knowledge. I need to know the Microsoft systems, the routers, the switches, the firewalls, the access points. I need to know Linux systems. I need to know everything I can about our computer systems. I need to know security principles. I need to be able to recognize attacks and use these forensic principles to figure out how did the attack occur, who might have done this. Once I realize I've got all this information, I'm going to be meeting with HR and the upper management team. We together will determine whether or not we are going to pursue going and taking this individual to court. At that moment in time, we may bring in our legal advisor. If the legal advisor says, yes, you have enough evidence to go to court, or no, you don't have enough evidence, they'll throw this out because of this. But these are some questions we need answers to. So we think about the communications. We may need to send somebody out in front of the media to say, hey, we were just attacked. We just got our computers breached. I'm sorry, we're Equifax. And there are 49 million people who have had their information breached. So we take a look at that aspect of it as well. So do we want to bring in somebody who's going to take care of this? We think about those first responders to the incident response team. What did they see? What did they capture? The process that we go through, you need to know the order of this. So the preparation, the tools and training. So we need to prepare whoever is going to be doing the forensic analysis. We got to prep them for this. We need to identify what happened. We need to go in and detect the event, the nature, the severity. Containment comes down to the forensic analyst. They're the one who is going to determine whether or not we need to stop the attack right now, or we're going to watch what goes back and returns to someone else. So containment is up to the discretion of the forensic analyst. We begin the investigation. We identify the effects and the root cause of the attack itself. Once we have done that, then we can go ahead and begin the eradication. Eliminate the root cause. Let's rebuild the system. Let's recover. Let's get back on here all the software we need, and let's get this system right back to the end user. If this happens to be a system that has been tagged for further forensic analysis, we're going to take this to court. Then we have to go find another machine to give to this end user. So again, we've got to get all their files and folders, all their applications, and get them back to work. but we're going to take their original machine and it's going to go to the forensic lab for further investigation. Once we're done with all this, we go to the lessons learned. We sit down with upper management. We sit down with the end user who had this issue and problem, and we talked about what information did we find, what actions did we take. Don't do this again. We just want to make sure the end user understands what happened so they never do this again. In preparing for the incidents, you want to develop an incident response team, and they need to create some policies and checklists of what to do should an incident occur. The documents that are expected for the incident types and the different categories, so we need to think about how we're going to write this up. We need to create and maintain a disaster recovery plan. We need to choose and train our response team. Response teams should be going to forensic training a couple times a year. Conduct exercises based on the likely or past incident. There is nothing wrong with practice, practice, practice. Your incident response teams always love that. So, hey, we just had this issue, this problem. Let's go ahead and test this. Let's make sure this works. This works properly. How many of you have ever flown into an airport, you looked out the window of the plane, and you see another plane that's not a full plane, it's a partial plane, but it looks like it's been burned in several areas. You ever seen that off the side of the runway? What do you think airports use that burned out plane for? They use it for training. How often? Three or four times a year. Really depends on what their policy says. But they go out there and they catch this thing on fire. They bring out the fire teams to put this thing out. They want to see what's the best way we can put this out. I don't know if you remember the ANA airplane that came in from Japan that hit the breakwater at San Francisco International Airport. This was pretty amazing. These guys came in too low. They hit the breakwater. The plane lifted up and actually spun a 360 and landed between the two runways. My buddy and I saw the plane sitting on the tarmac, burning. The top portion was burned. Whole thing was covered in foam. And he looks at me and he goes, because they showed an aerial shot and it was less than 50 yards from the breakwater. How could a plane end up there? How could that happen? So we're looking at, just the incident, trying to figure out how did this happen. It wasn't until 3 days later when some guy was driving by that he actually took a picture of the plane coming down, hitting the breakwater, spinning in midair and coming down and landing. And you look at this. When the fire department gets out there, the first thing they say is, this could catch fire. So the first thing they do is they hit it with foam. The foam is going to keep this thing from burning. So they hit this with foam. What they didn't realize were that a couple passengers had jumped out of the side window, were running and tripped, and the foam covered them. And they accidentally ran over them with their fire trucks. So this has really changed. Things like this will change the way that fire departments do things. One of the reasons that they keep going out and doing these exercises and drills is to make it better, safer, faster for getting people out of a plane like that and out of the incident. So anytime we can take the time to train our response team, this is what we do. So you want to conduct these exercises. So you want to ensure the response team has sufficient authority to do what they need to do. Make sure that they have the right tools. Educate the users, educate the employees about what these guys do and how they get their job done. So you want to monitor any system events that are out there. You want to be able to identify the incidents. You want to rely on multiple sources. Where do the incidents come from? Examine anything unusual. So if you see anything unusual, many times you can just blame unusual on a Windows machine, but still, there are things that happen on our Windows machines that we can't explain, and it could be that somebody's dropped an antivirus on your system. Evaluate the incident's nature. What are some of the telltale signs that say that something has happened? Evaluate the scope and severity of the incident. Is it isolated to this one machine, or did it get out to a whole bunch of other machines? Sorry. Thought I had turned that off. Sorry, I turned up the ringer so it would wake me up in the morning. Yeah, you know how it is when you're a hard sleeper. Okay, so again, the incident scope and severity of what we have. We also want to escalate the incident appropriately. So should we not be able to solve this, we might need to bring in some other incident response team. You should always, as an upper manager, have the phone number and email address of additional teams that might be in the area. You want to contain the incident. You want to shut down the affected services or systems. You want to quarantine any affected system. You might want to allow the affected system to operate, but you directly monitor where they're sending the traffic. Temporarily repair the vulnerabilities. Secure the related or vulnerable assets. Bring the backup systems online. So once I've secured the related and vulnerable assets, I may take those to my forensic lab. I may then bring in a backup system and get that backup online so I can get my end user working again. As we start thinking about investigating the accident or the incident, what data needs to be collected? Include information placed on legal hold. If this is going to a forensic lab, if this is going to go to the courts, what is it that we're taking to the courts on the legal side of things? Make sure that you secure the physical and remote access to the system. Again, you're probably going to be disconnecting it. Document the scene as found. So you want to make sure that you are taking pictures of this. The known changes made during containment. Use forensic backup software to preserve your information, especially that volatile information. Verify the information that's going to answer those questions later. Secure the confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity of your findings. We then want to eradicate the problems, clean up the damage, repair or replace the damaged hardware, remove infected software or unauthorized accounts, replace passwords or other credentials, fully restore the system, restore the network structure. Harden your network against a reoccurrence. Figure out why this happened. How did they find their way in between the creases in your levels of security? They got in somehow. How'd they get in? What did they do? Update your systems, patch them, disable any unnecessary services, revise your configuration files or your access control list to keep people out. Notify the relevant personnel that we've got. In restoring the systems, create the service restoration plan that we have. Certify the restored systems. Make sure they're fully operational and secure. Formally restore those services and continue the monitoring that we have. The last portion of this is the lessons learned. This is where we're sitting down with upper management and the individual whose machine or system had been compromised. So we look at the extent of the incident, the scope, the cost, the duration. I will tell you right now that if you want to do an incident response and you're going to take it all the way to court over a couple of years, it's going to cost you anywhere from $200,000 to $2 million to do that. So if one incident is worth that much, be my guest. But it does cost a lot of money to prosecute something like this. Was the response that we had adequate? Did we get to it in time? Was the team properly prepared to handle this type of incident? Was the detection of this timely? Were communications and documentations thorough and clear? When you look back on the response that they gave us for the Equifax, they said, oh, it took us 6 weeks to figure out what happened. You knew you were breached, but you didn't bother to tell us? Oh no, our upper management team needed to sell all their stocks before we could tell anybody. That's what happened. SEC has now stepped in because you are not allowed to do that. If you're in the upper management team and there's been a breach, you're not allowed to use that information to go out and sell your stocks. So the guys that are in the upper management team are facing 20 to 30 years in jail for that. So you're not allowed to sell your stocks and something like that. So was the detection timely? where communications and documentation is thorough and clear. Prevention. How do we prevent this from ever happening again? What was the education? What are the policies that we've now updated and put into place? Do we have new security measures? This all becomes important to us. Okay, we have a couple questions. So order the steps of the incident response process. What comes first? Preparation, followed by? Identification. Next one? Containment. Next one? Investigation, followed by? Eradication. Next? Recovery and follow-up. There you go. Preparation, identification, containment, investigation, eradication, recovery, and follow-up. What is e-discovery? What is it? You are the process of sharing electronic forensic data. Nowadays, e-discovery is so much easier because we now have pretty much scanned in all of our paperwork and whatnot. We can share that electronically with somebody else. Here are the photos I took. It's really hard to forensically show you the data, the actual hands-on computer that was picked up, though. You should start choosing an incident response team as soon as you've identified an incident. That's false. You need to do this about a year ahead of time. After a security incident, you rush to take a screenshot of a telltale running process before you leisurely take a backup of suspicious files on the hard drive. What forensic principle are you exercising? Order of volatility, yes. Why is it important to record a time offset when you are collecting evidence? There you go, to compensate for the time differences between multiple systems. So my system may be off by 2 hours from your system, so we need to take a look at that because the log files are going to be different. So in this chapter, we took a look at how to create and test business continuity plans, including business impact analysis and disaster recovery plans, how to test those plans. We also took a look at how to identify recovery objectives, implement fault tolerance and redundancy for critical systems, and to create a sound data backup policy. Finally, we took a look at the principle of digital forensics, how to design an efficient incident response plan. I'm sorry, but we've got 6 more chapters and I don't have any slides, so I guess we're, Let me take a look here and show you a couple of the hands-on that you should look at before you get to tomorrow. First one I want to look at is this performance-based questions that you have here. So, that's not going to work until I go in and talk about display settings. Okay, here you go. It would be inappropriate for me to tell you that this was one of the questions that was on the exam. I'm sorry, did I say it? God, how did that get out? That would be inappropriate. So when you take a look at this, we want to easily differentiate between the mobile devices and the servers in a report, so the standard naming convention will do this. If everything in there is named router or switch or workstation or phone, not going to work. You want to make sure that you easily differentiate between these devices. Enforce password complexity requirements. This again can be done in group policy. Remember, we saw the group policy a little earlier. The GPO, the group policy objects, password complexity was part of that. Anytime we have a terminated employee, this is an offboarding situation. They're walking out of our office either with a phone or a computer that might have data on it. It's important for us to make sure that that information is being removed from their system or that those devices are being returned to us. And the only other last choice that we have in identifying which employees have access to sensitive file shares, we're going to review the permission auditing files that we have. So we take a look at any permissions that are on the system and make sure that people have the right permissions to get into something. Okay, this one you don't have to worry about. This one you will see, we talked about this the other day. If the attacker is going to gain control, gain confidential company information, they're targeting the CEO and the board members because they're targeting a specific group, it's called whaling. The next one is the attacker is going to post links to a fake AV site because it's fake, and we're setting this to over multiple social networks to a broad set of victims. This is a hoax. If my attacker is going to collect credit cards over the phone, this is vishing. If the attacker is going to do a mass mailing product information to parties that have already opted out of receiving advertisements, so my recipient group is going to be a broad set of recipients. This is a spam. They don't want it. We're sending it to them. And finally, the attacker is being redirected with name resolution, usually domain name resolution, entries from legitimate sites to a fraudulent site. This is known as farming because I'm redirecting you back over to a fraudulent site instead of your legitimate site. Okay? This is one that I've seen pop up. The way this works is that this instance of the compromise is actually sitting right up here. Okay. So they're saying a security auditor is reviewing the following output from the file integrity monitoring software installed on the busy server at a large service provider. The server has not been updated since it was installed. What you need to do is identify the first instance of a server compromise. When we take a look at the files that are up on the top group is underneath the temp password or the etc password directory. That has nothing to do with a server compromise. So we don't look at that one. We come down here to the IP tables. IP tables are used for what in the Linux world? That's the same as my host file. So it's just pointing to a bunch of host DNS resolutions. The next one then talks about my boot INI ITRD. This is my image file. So what we're seeing is this particular thing is sitting up here. They're asking for the first instance of a server compromise. These are the hashes of those files. This was on December 30th of 2016 at 1:30 in the morning. This is 2:30 in the morning. So they have not altered. When we get down to January 1st of 2017 at 3:30 in the morning, this has been altered. You'll notice that this ends in CAO2. This ends in 4 Delta Frank 3, which is also what this one does. So this is where that first instance of alteration or compromise has occurred, is this time right here. So you'll grab this one right here and drag it right there. Okay? That makes it easy for you. This is the hard one. This is the one that's number one that's going to be happening right when you get into the test. This is the first thing. So when I take a look at this, what I see on the very top of this is something called the unsupervised lab. What are those devices in the unsupervised lab? Are we concerned with the laptops getting up and walking out the door? What can I do to protect my laptop from getting up and walking out the door? Tie it to the desk with cable lock. How many cable locks do I have? How many workstations? There you go. All your cable locks are going to be gone. You're going to grab a cable lock. You're going to drag it over it. When you drag over number 1, you'll have 5 left. Then number 2, you'll have 4 left. That's how that works. Okay. Now the other things that we have over here is I have an office here, right here. Got a workstation laptop. What is this right here? Is there a safe up there? Can I drag safe over here right away? Yes. What do I have here? I've got my data center. What do I have over there? Laptop employees. So when I take a look at what we have left over here, what do I have most of over here besides the cable locks, because we already got rid of those? Biometric readers. Where might I have biometric readers? Employee laptops. Boom, boom, boom. There's 3 of those. I need to think about where I'm going to put my other biometric reader. In my data center. Well, let's think about that for a minute. I have 2 proximity badges now. So I have nothing over there, because those have both been taken. I got this and this. I've got 2 proximity badges. Where should I put them? One and one. One over here, one over here. What else did we put over here? I've got a safe over here. I've got a biometric reader. Does that mean everything else goes here? So if we go up here, let's see. We have a proximity badge here. We have 1 leftover biometric reader. Does that go here? How about my man trap? My closed circuit TV? Locking cabinets. We're done. See how easy that was? Just takes a little logic. What's that? That can't be, because I already just gave you 4 out of the 5 questions you're going to get. I'm sorry, did I say that? What I meant to say was, we can go over more of these. So it's actually going to show you. This would be the other one that you get. This is the other one that, and I find this rather interesting because this one is opinionated because I've got 4 different versions of it and they all have different answers. So let's talk about it. What do you want to do? Start on the left-hand side with controls. Tell me what you want to put in there for a smartphone. Screen lock, yes. Do I want a strong password for my phone? Do I want, you said device encryption, yes. Remote wipe? GPS tracking? Pop-up lockers? I don't need it, not for a phone. Cable lock? Sorry, are you dragging that desk behind you? Yeah, my phone. Somebody connected my phone to a cable lock, and the cable lock's on my desk. How about antivirus? Really depends on the kind of phone that you have. I don't know that I don't think they put it in there. How about a host-based firewall? No. Proximity reader? No. Sniffer? No. Man trap? No. So you may or may not want to put the antivirus. Let's go over the terminal server. Start at the top. A screen lock for my terminal server? No. Strong password? Yes. Device encryption? Yes. Remote wipe? No, not for a terminal server. Remote wipe is for something that gets in your pocket when you're out in the field. How about GPS tracking? Nope. How about a pop-up blocker? Okay. How about cable locks? Nope. How about antivirus? Yep. Host-based firewall? Proximity reader? Yep. Sniffer? If I had to use one, I'd say yes. How about a man trap? It is a terminal server, so it's going to be in my server room, so yes. Those are the 5 that my students have been telling me they've been getting. So, oh, I'm sorry. There's one other. So you're going to get this one, which is the WAP performance. So this is just kind of a glimpse of what you're going to see. It doesn't have the right answers in there, so it's just a glimpse of what you get. So this is the best we could do as I scoured the people that I know who provide me these things. A newly changed corporate WAP needs to be configured in the most secure manner possible. Click on the items in the diagram. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys can't see this. Close your eyes. I'll make sure it comes across an image in your face. Okay, let's try this once again. A newly changed corporate WAP needs to be configured in the most secure manner possible. Click on the items in the diagram listed below to configure them accordingly. So you have to go into the WAP, wireless access point, DHCP server, AAA server, your wireless controller, and your LDAP server. So as you are coming down, it gets you into the wireless access point. They're going to ask you to set up the wireless mode. So you have to take a look at what mode you want. You're going to be asked to change the name of the SSID. Should the SSID be broadcast be enabled or disabled? To be secure, it needs to be disabled. Okay. What is the best security mode that I can put on this? WPA2 Enterprise. If by chance you've got a radius server address that they give you, you just put that in here. It's going to tell you what passphrase to put in there. And you don't have to worry about the port number. In the DHCP, they're going to give you the IP address, the subnet mask, the default gateway, the range of addresses you'll be passing out, the DNS server address, any reserved addresses that you've got for MAC addresses. The domain is named corporate net, and port number for DHCP is 67. 68's the other one. You'll be asked to set up a AAA server. Here's the address. Here's the subnet. Here's the default gateway. Here's your secret password, which is corporate net. The realm, which is the, what do they call that? The domain equivalent to a domain on a AAA server, is known as wireless net. And this is port 1812. They're going to give you all of this information in the setup for you. They're going to give you the wireless controller. They're going to say, here's your address, here's your default gateway, your subnet mask. The username, administrative user is root. The administrative password is corporate nets. My WAP key is super secret, and my port number is 1212. And finally, they're going to give me the LDAP server. Again, they're asking for pretty much the same thing. So again, you would just simply take a look at that and say, I'm going to transfer this and type this right in. Most of it's going to, I believe it's going to be a pull-down menu off the right-hand side where it actually says, where's your address? And it's going to show you a whole list of addresses. You just need to choose the one that's there. So the best thing to do is just take out the piece of paper you're given and just write this stuff down and then move into it, start putting this inside. So you've been given 6 questions, and 5 of them will probably be on your test. Okay. Since I mentioned we would be done at 3:30, I apologize because I just went over by 10 minutes. So we are done.